All right. Now, speaking of my mother, she wrote letters to me over the course of the 6.5 years that she cared for my dad after he had a stroke. And her letters were just so honest and so real, and she did not hold anything back. So I was not surprised by her anger, her grief, her guilt, the sadness and the struggle that she had caring for him. But she did surprise me. And this was about 4.5 years after my dad started wearing adult diapers when she wrote this letter. And she would have been wearing her apron because she always wore her apron, because if you wear an apron, you don't get your clothes dirty, you don't have to wash them as often, and they don't wear out. So she would have gone to her desk, and imagine my surprise when I got this letter from her. She said, "Dear Elaine, don't know if I have told you about Quentin's recent obsession with sex. Just out of the blue one morning, he turned to me at breakfast and he said, Madeline, it occurs to me that you don't want to have sex with me anymore." I said, "That's right, Quentin, that part of our life is over." And then he said, "Well, if you're not willing to have sex with me, would it be okay with you if I had sex with somebody else?" I said, "Sure, why not? You know what? Knock yourself out. Just go for it." For crying out loud. I figured if he could find someone who was willing to have sex with him, she could have all of him. She could deal with his wet depends. She could change his soggy sheets in the middle of the night. She could pick him up off of the floor when he fell, and she could just have him all to herself. Good grief. But then the next morning at breakfast, he turned to me and he said, "Madeline, would you call Avis for me?" He did not want me to rent a car. Avis is the name of the girl that he took to his high school senior prom 60 years ago. Well, of course I didn't want to call Avis, but that was all he could talk about all morning long. He just followed me from room to room saying, "Have you called Avis? When are you going to call Avis? Why haven't you called Avis? Are we going to call Avis now? When are we going to call Avis?" Well, finally, I couldn't take it anymore. So I went to the phone, I picked it up, and I called Avis. I did not tell her why Quentin wanted to see her, but it turns out she and her husband live in Wichita. It's about 50 miles from McPherson, and they were coming to McPherson on Saturday for a funeral. So I said, "Well, why don't we meet at the Red Coach Inn for lunch?" And so she agreed to. Well, I didn't know what to expect from lunch, but when Avis came walking in, she had her oxygen bottle strapped to her walker. And I thought, okay, well, that'll take care of that. So we sat down, we had a nice lunch. I was telling Avis's husband all of the things that I was doing to make it easier to take care of Quentin. Like I had Greg come home and install a ceiling hoist above the bed so that when Quentin was struggling to get out of bed, I could wrap that strap around him, and then I could use that hoist to lift him up so that I could get his feet on the floor and get him out a little easier. And I bought a plastic pad like you see in offices so that I could put it underneath his chair and he could scoot up to and away from the table with less difficulty. And then Avis's husband was telling me all of the things that he was doing to make it easier to care for her. So it was a nice lunch. They're lovely people. We got in the car to go home, and I turned to Quentin and I said, "So, what do you think of Avis now?" And he said, "I think she wants me." So this situation went on for months. And every 10 days to 2 weeks, I would get another letter from Mom about how they had met with Avis and her husband. And honestly, it didn't upset me. My dad didn't have the cognitive reasoning that he once had. He thought he was still capable of farming. He thought he was still capable of carrying my suitcase up the stairs when I came home to visit, and he thought he was still capable of having sex. And if Mom wouldn't have it with him, then if she would just arrange it for him to have sex with somebody else, he would be perfectly capable. So I didn't get that upset or alarmed until one day I got a letter, and I was standing at the kitchen counter reading it, and my husband was sitting over at the table drinking coffee and reading the paper, and I said, "Listen to this." She wrote, "Speaking of jobs, which we weren't, I need for you to do something when you come home next week. I need for you to have the sex talk with your father." And I thought, oh, good Lord, my dad and I have never talked about sex. He's 80 years old. He's been in adult diapers for more than 4 years, and I don't want to be the one to have this conversation with him. But my mother was exasperated. My brothers were furious. My sisters-in-law were disgusted, so it fell on me. Flew home, got Dad in the pickup. We went for a drive to look at the crops, and I saw him looking wistfully out the window at a farmer that was plowing his field. And I said, "Oh, Dad, I'm sorry you can't farm anymore. I know you really miss it." And he said, "I do, but that's not the worst part." And I said, "Really? What is?" And he said, "It's your mother. She's cut me off." And I thought, oh, no. So I pulled the pickup off to the side of the road, and I switched off the ignition, and I said, "Dad, now you listen to me." I said, "The reason that you can't be out there driving a tractor is the same reason that you can't have sex with Mom. It's the stroke and it's the prostate cancer. So, you know what? You are not being nice to her. She is working so hard to take care of you, and this just isn't, it's just not respectful, and it's not nice. And besides that, Dad, it takes a certain amount of physical dexterity to have sex, and you don't have it. You're a big man, she's a little woman, and you could hurt her." And I said, "And for crying out loud, you haven't even thought about the logistics. Mom would have to drive you to a hotel. Avis's husband would have to drive her to the hotel. And then what the heck do you think those two are going to be doing while you're in there trying to have sex? I mean, seriously. Do you think that she's going to take the ceiling hoist down, put it in her purse, then take it in, slip it up on the ceiling of the hotel room, and then help you out?" I said, "No, stop it." Okay, I did not handle it well, obviously. And there were several things that we did not know at that time, and how I wish we had. And the first thing is, you can never, ever, ever, as I said earlier, win an argument with a person who has dementia. And we had not heard the term stroke-related dementia, but that was what was going on with my dad. And then the second thing that we did not understand is that surprising and inappropriate sexual behavior is not at all unusual in stroke survivors, people with Alzheimer's, and individuals who take dopamine to control the symptoms of Parkinson's. Now, poor Doris found this out the hard way, and she came up to me after one of my workshops, and she said, "So do Parkinson's people have this issue with sex too?" Now, this was about 12 years ago, and I didn't know a lot about it, and I said, "I don't know, but I'm going to go research it, and then I will let you know." So I did, and I called her back, and I told her that yes, sometimes dopamine can change the chemicals in a person's brain, and what happens is that they can become addicted to pornography, to gambling, and sometimes to shopping. So this helped Doris, because right before she had come to this meeting, she had opened up her Comcast bill and she had been charged $700 for porn. And she ran to the phone, she called Comcast, and she said, "You have made a terrible mistake. You have charged us for $700 worth of porn, and we do not watch those kinds of movies in this house." And the man was very kind, and he said, "Let me put you on hold for a few minutes. I'm going to go check it out. I'll come back and I'll let you know." And when he did, he came back and he said, "Ma'am, I am sorry to tell you, but this is happening every morning at your house between 3 and 5 a.m. So fortunately, Comcast worked with her to put a filter on the TV so that he could not watch these types of movies and be billed for it, and they erased that balance. But that was a rude way to learn that how that could affect her husband. And initially, she was furious with him. And then when she found out that it was a possible side effect, she was furious with the doctor for not letting her know. And then there was Sadie, dear sweet Sadie, who lived in a memory care community in Woodburn, Oregon, which is close to my home. And I was visiting with the administrator there one day, and she said, "We got Sadie, and we were just wondering, how did we get so lucky to have her? Because she's just sweet, she's agreeable, she's happy. Her favorite thing to do all day long is to just sit in the reception area and greet people as they come and go." And then one afternoon, it was summer, and this strapping, handsome UPS delivery driver came in, and he was wearing short sleeves and short pants. And Sadie took one look at him, and she said, "Well, hello." And he said, "Hi, sweetie." And she said, "Would you like to see me dance?" And he said, "I would love to see you dance." And imagine everybody's surprise when she stood up. She ripped open her sweater, she pulled up her top, and she started to gyrate the way only a 90-year-old woman can. Well, the administrator was totally shocked. She got an assistant to take Sadie back to her room and get her into her clothes, and then she called Sadie's daughter. And the daughter said, "My mother would never do such a thing. She is a good Christian woman." And she was highly offended, and the administrator said to her, "It did happen, and I'm pretty sure that her religion had nothing to do with that dance." And just one more quick story. My friend Kathy went to move her parents from their home into an extended living community with memory care. Dad had been taking care of the mom for years, and he had reached the point that he couldn't do it any longer. So my friend went home, and as she was loading up the medicine cabinet, she pulled out a prescription, and she looked at it horrified, and she walked out to her dad, and she said, "Viagra? Seriously, Dad? Viagra? Seriously?" And he said, "She may not remember my name, but when I kiss her, she never forgets what comes next. It relaxes her. It keeps us connected. It's the one thing that makes her happy. And if you've got a problem with that, get over it." And he took the pills from her and he put them in her pocket. So I have so many stories, not enough time to tell them all to you. But the point that I want to make is that we are born as sexual beings and we die as sexual beings. And even diseases as devastating as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and the impact that strokes have on people's brain does not diminish that spark within each of us. So, going back to my parents, a few weeks after I got home, I got another letter from Mom, and she said that after I left and blew the sex talk, she sat down with Quentin and she decided that they were just going to do what they had always done during their 56 years of marriage. They would just have a rational, reasonable conversation, and she would just put this issue to bed, figuratively. And she said about 10 minutes into it, she realized, he is just not playing with a full deck. So she decided to just have fun with the story. So she went to the phone, she called Avis, and she said, Avis, guess why Quentin has really been wanting to see you all of these months? And you know what Avis's response was? Oh, really? She was flattered. She was not upset or offended, and she thought it was funny and sweet, and she had a lot of fun going to her cousin's beauty shop and telling all of the ladies in there about her amorous boyfriend from McPherson. Now, Avis's husband's response was more like, really? But who knows? Perhaps knowing that there was another man who found her absolutely irresistible made him look at Avis just a little bit differently. And to my mother's credit, she did not understand the damage that had occurred in Quentin's brain as a result of the stroke. But she did know him. And so she made a conscious choice not to be angry, jealous, or hurt. And she just decided to have fun with the story. So that's the way it went on for several more months. And then one day they were on their way home from Wichita after having visited with Avis and her husband. And Quentin turned to Madeline and he said, I'm glad I did not marry Avis. And Madeline said, oh, really? Why's that? And he said, didn't you see her teeth? He said, our kids would have looked like chipmunks. And that was the end of the affair. He went back to being the loving, faithful husband he had always been.